Is inflation out of control in the United States right now? The United States economy is a complicated beast, getting more complicated by the day. It is challenging to forecast the future course of the United States economy due to the unusual convergence of many issues, including a protracted labor shortage, interruptions in supply chain operations, and volatility in the energy market. On the one hand, the unemployment rate is at a level that is very close to reaching record lows. Job creation is solid, and consumer spending is healthy. The future seems to be full of promise when seen just through these glasses. However, unfortunately, a troublesome guest from the 1970s and early 1980s has returned, and that is excessive inflation. The most common place for customers to observe this is at the pump. As a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, energy markets have been thrown into disarray, causing many Americans to spend more than $5 a gallon on gasoline. When you take in the interruptions to the supply chain caused by the pandemic, as well as the shortages of commodities caused by industries having to close for lockdowns, or our previously bright financial outlook is now facing some headwinds. It's no secret that economies have a hard time forecasting recessions. In fact, Lawrence Ball of Johns Hopkins University has been quoted as saying that it's difficult to predict when a recession will hit. It's like predicting the weather. And yet, Ball and his peers have been forced to do just that, forecast the weather, or rather, their version of it, an economic storm that could be brewing on the horizon. In other words, the Federal Reserve is now operating in the eye of this potentially developing storm, attempting to rein in the economy's excesses without inflicting any of its own sufferings. For a long time, economists anticipated that our economy in the years after the pandemic would be similar to that of the Roaring '20s. These days, however, a new R term is being bandied about: recession. To say the least, this is an odd moment to be an economist, as Lawrence Ball of Johns Hopkins University is well aware. Suffice to say, the economy is in a state of flux. He said the economy sort of cruises along and takes care of itself. Still, every once in a while, something totally unforeseen occurs to throw it off balance. It should be no surprise that COVID in 2020 will serve as an extreme illustration of this. The substantial inflation throughout this time is one thing that stands out in comparison to the roughly previous 40 years. To be clear, a recession is not immediately brought on by inflation. However, the Federal Reserve's plans to curb inflation by increasing interest rates may result in a recession. Right now, everyone's primary focus is on their financial situation. People around the BR region are being buried by inflation. To summarize everything, the following is a list of the reports that we have gathered. Prices paid by consumers rose by 8.5% during the year that ended in March 2022. The Consumer Price Index increased 7.9% between February 2021 and February 2022, followed by a rise of 8.5% for the year that concluded in March 2022. The annual growth rate of 8.5% in March was the most significant gain over the previous 12 months since December 1981. The annual rise in food costs experienced by consumers was the highest since May 1981 and came in at 8.8% in March 2022. Regarding food, the prices of food purchased at home increased by 10%, while the cost of food purchased away from home increased by 6.9%. Prices paid by consumers for energy rose by a total of 32% between March 2021 and March 2022. During this time, fuel oil prices climbed by 70.1%. Gasoline prices increased by 48%. Electricity prices increased by 11.1%. and natural gas prices increased by 21.6%. The overall increase in consumer prices, excluding those for food and energy, was 6.5% for the year that ended in March 2022. The year-over-year rise in housing costs was the most it has been since May 1991 and was 5%. Because of all that has been going on, do not overlook the fact that we need to have at least 5 different budgeting ideas to cope with this unprecedented level of inflation. Spend less on things that aren't required, look for less priced options, buy in quantity, always stay on top of the repayment of your debt, use less energy if you can. Are you scared of inflation right now? Inflation is a pretty scary thing, but it's not something that's going to affect you immediately. For some of us, inflation is just a word we hear on TV when they say something like, inflation has exceeded expectations, or the economy is feeling the effects of inflation. It's something that sounds like it's happening somewhere far away and has nothing to do with us. But it does have everything to do with us. When inflation goes up, prices go up too. The cost of goods increases, so your paycheck doesn't go as far as it used to. The more money you make, the more expensive things become. And if you don't make as much money anymore, you're putting more pressure on yourself than ever before. That's why inflation can be scary. It means there are fewer resources available for everyone because everyone needs those resources more than ever before. And if there aren't enough resources, well, then what happens next? I hope you liked and learned something from today's video. If you want to keep improving and being inspired, subscribe and press the bell button to be alerted whenever we upload a video. This has been Market Profits Institute.